What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, and today I am talking about the latest offering from UK death metal legends Benediction, Ravage the Empires. This also came out on April 4th, this time on Nuclear Blast Records, and this is the band's 9th studio full-length overall, and I'll be honest with you, this is my first full sit-down with a Benediction album. I've heard some songs in passing over the years in my discovery of everything metal. Again, there's just so many bands, so many albums out there, I can't get to everything. There's only so many hours in a day. But regardless, when I saw this was coming out, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to check out Benediction, because from what I've heard, it's awesome, killer old-school death metal. And this is actually, I guess, the second album in their comeback arc. They had one 5 years ago, Scriptures, which I do have in the collection. I just haven't sat down to listen to it yet. But when I saw this was coming out, I'm like, I gotta review it. And I will go ahead and say, in terms of like straight up death metal, this is probably going to be one of the strongest offerings of this year thus far. Kicking things off with a Carrion Harvest, immediately like big tremolo riffs. It's very thrashy, and really like the main excuse me, and really like the main gears on this album are essentially like, you know, big killer grooves, thrashy energy, tremolo riffs that just scream old school death metal, but also some like punky and hardcore moments kind of get thrown into this, which kind of goes back to like how a good chunk of the UK death metal scene back in the late 80s, early 90s were still heavily inspired by punk and hardcore, you know, like, of course, Napalm Death being grind and eventually going death metal and death grind. Carcass having a little bit of like the punkiness, and of course Bull Thrower had their roots out of that, so this no surprise that UK death metal still has a little bit of that like UK punk and hardcore element to it. But with this opening track, and I love how, and actually one of the big sneak attacks is how like catchy some of these songs are, especially in the riff department. Like, this album is driven by riffs and the drums. And this song right away, like, it's furious, it's catchy, nice gallops and some like thrashy machine gun riffs, even a killer groove with melodic tags on the guitars. So overall, it was a killer way to get things going. And then going back to what I was talking about with some of the more punky, hardcore moments that show up, Beyond the Veil of the Grey Mare, the following track, crawling riffs on top of awesome chunks that come along on top of hardcore D beats. It's like hardcore with balls to it, but done in a death metal sense. And then the grooves that come in laid with the tremolo riffs on top, it's just like, hey, we can be just as sinister at tremolos as a lot of other death metal bands. Genesis Chamber in particular was a big standout for me. Like, it starts off with this, I would argue, like a harmonized classic metal melody, and it builds everything up nicely, and then the drums, of course, just come in flying, and then you get like, briefly, you get like Morbid Angel tremolos before it just gets down and dirty at brashy, thrash-tinged riffage and rhythms. But there's even some like Obituary riffs that show up. Like, Obituary riffs kind of get peppered in here intermittently, like here and later on the track Crawling Over Corpses has some of that Obituary element going on. And then going back to like the more hardcore oriented style riffs and grooves, Deviant Spine just has this awesome lumbering groove that feels very much like hardcore inspired death metal, like to compare it to like a modern band like Gatecreeper, for example. But of course the drums are just flying. Even the melodies on top of the breakdown were pretty cool. Engines of War, like this track, Drought of Mercy, and the closer, the title track, all three of these songs are just going for double time madness, which again can make you think of Obituary, but I would say more particularly in Engines of War made me think of Bolt Thrower, which of course Benediction and Bolt Thrower are like this, like really close. And of course, this is where you get some more of those punky moments. Like, it's thrashy still, but you also get some like punky riffs. And of course, like I said, the grooves on this album are really killer. But the main groove that stands out for me on this album is the following track, the finality of Perpetuation. Well, first it starts off with these like harmonies into thrashy tremolos. It's a pummeling song, all things considered. Angular melodies, and then the grooves and the chugs on this song just is nasty. Oh, it is so nasty, it makes my voice go away. But regardless, Crawling Over Corpses, we're back to chugging riffs right at the beginning, and then again, it's more of like a D-beat stomper with tremolos on top before you get those obituary grooves. And this is the only track on the album where you get as close to a lead, even though it's more of a lead melody to complement the riff, and it's really well done. And then a part that stood out to me on this song, the breakdown and the riff and the rhythm that follows, made me think of the song Death Shall Rise by fellow UK death metal legends Cancer. Atonal melodies show up, which atonal melodies only are on here as well as the end of the title track, but in the Dread of the Night, off-time melodies and rhythms at the beginning before they become more cohesive, and then you get like thrashy D beats and tremolos on top, and then there's even an eerie melody that made me think of Asphyx quite a good bit. More chugging grooves, like this was the other big groove that stood out to me on this album. Shroud of Mercy's largely a galloping stomper. It's energetic, though you get a couple sections where they slow it down to like Death Doom territory a little bit. Of course, more Double Time Madness. And then probably the only thing I have to complain about is the song Psycho Sister. Just the title itself's just kind of stupid. But the song itself, awesome drum intro, and it's largely a big triplet chug bastard. It's nasty, chunky, heavy, but then it leads perfectly into the title track, which machine gun riffs, D-beat stomps, double time heft. There's some really cool melodies peppered in, awesome tremolos, more lumbering grooves, and like I said, towards the end, you get like a more higher end atonal melody before it gets back to the main meat and potatoes of the song. And the production, I love the production. The bass is audible, the mix is great, the sound is awesome. And while this is very much meat and potatoes death metal, I love meat and potatoes death metal, and it's done with so much energy on here. Like the thrashy, punky, hardcore moments that show up on here are awesome, but the chugs and the groove when they show up, the double time madness, it's just... I don't have anything to complain about this album musically, although, of course, the title of Psycho Sister stupid, and even the album covers very much the same color scheme as Scriptures. But overall, I'm gonna go ahead and say this is 4.5 out of 5. This was some awesome stuff, and I definitely plan to get this album pretty soon into the collection. But if you're a longtime fan of Benediction, you're gonna dig this. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.